everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Okay, my guest today is Dr. David Wiss. Dr. David is a thought leader in the space of nutrition and the direct correlation that it has to mental health. I so enjoyed this conversation. I enjoy every conversation I have with people that come on the podcast, but especially those who really are aligned to what it is that I'm doing in mental health and coaching. And Dr. David is really an expert when it comes to nutrition and its relation and correlation to having good mental health outcomes. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. David. He has over 20 published peer-reviewed articles. That's a lot. Dr. David founded Nutrition and Recovery. It's a group of registered dietitians who specialize in treating eating disorders as well as substance abuse. He earned his PhD in public health with a minor in health psychology from UCLA by investigating the links between adverse childhood experiences and mental health outcomes amongst socially disadvantaged men. Dr. Wiss's newest venture, which is coming out this summer, is his app called Wise Mind Nutrition. Wise Mind Nutrition delivers educational content using nutrition and lifestyle medicine to improve mental health outcomes. So this was an easy conversation. This is someone who really knows diet and really understands nutrition and how we can have better mental health outcomes when we take care of our bodies. He has a great and colorful backstory. You want to listen to where this guy comes from because, man, he's been through it. And that was interesting. And I always find it so interesting with what it is that people go through in their lives and how that informs the people or the person that they are today. So this is a story that you don't want to miss. So welcome. If you're here for the first time, welcome back. If you are a listener already, and I hope that you enjoy this one. Mad love. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Badass Confidence Coach podcast. My guest today, who's here with me, is Dr. David Wiss. If you all are watching now on YouTube, you can see his beautiful face. And he is here today to talk to us about some very important, relevant, and pertinent topics, which are my jam. So I'm going to let Dr. David introduce himself and tell us a little bit about him. And then we're going to get into this conversation. Hello.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello. I am reporting from West Los Angeles, and life is good. And I'm really
good for you.
Thrilled to be here. It feels like we are very aligned on so many topics, and I'm excited to dive into some of them with you today.
Yeah.
Yes. I am a practitioner and a mental health scientist. So I do have over 10 years experience working one-on-one with people, and I've done some really cool research about mental health, food addiction, eating disorders, and I get to bring it all together and hopefully share some things with you all today.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So we're aligned. Before we started recording, I was telling you that eating disorders is where I started in my private practice 25 years ago. I worked in a PHP, a partial hospitalization and intensive outpatient program. At that time, mostly adolescents and women in their 20s. Every now and then we had someone who was in their 30s, but it was mostly teenagers. And what a great place to earn my stripes, so to speak, as a therapist, and did that for many years in that program in a hospital, and then went on my own. And so when I saw that you know eating disorders, that's a specialty, and a lot of people don't really know and have worked with people with true eating disorders. So of course, right away I was interested in talking to you about nutrition and mental health. Yeah.
And it's not a binary. It's not like, oh, there's an eating disorder or not. Like people are on this continuum of disordered eating. There's body image disturbances, and there's food noise and body noise. So it's funny, if you look at the kind of wellness space and you look at health in general, it seems like the eating disorder silo is the opposite of the wellness silo in some ways. And they've created this false binary, when in reality, there's a need to be eating disorder informed across all the spaces, and to be wellness informed across the eating disorder space.
Sure. I find that many people, though, are not eating disorder informed, or they're not disordered eating informed. They don't see, I think, what you and I would see. They don't see it. And that concerns me, because I'm looking and I'm watching on social media. I'm thinking that's disordered eating. And that's the messaging that so many people are paying attention to. And I worry for these people, because I think they're going to go down a rabbit hole, and we see it before it's happening.
Yeah, a lot of people never had the training, and then a lot of people just say it's just a small percentage, who cares? Let them figure it out on their own. And then a lot of people disagree with some of the messaging that comes from the eating disorder space.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dr. David, tell us, how did you get into this field? What brought you here into nutrition and mental health?
Yeah, it's sort of a second career. I had some personal health challenges in my early 20s. I was very unwell physically and mentally, and desperately seeking a new chapter. And I kind of hit a hard restart at age 24, stopped drinking, and used nutrition and exercise to revolutionize my life.
Good for
And
you.
it actually worked, right? I had what people are looking for when they try to get into health, like a rapid transformation within a few months. My skin changed, my eyes changed, and everyone noticed, right? That actually happened to me. Sunlight, water, supplements. I just did a full thing that no one told me to do. It was very intuitively guided. I didn't have a dietitian, a therapist, a trainer, none of it. I just knew that there was a lot of stuff that was out there in the world that I hadn't touched yet and that I should go explore.
I wonder how you knew that. That's interesting.
Yeah. It's
Most
funny
people
though.
Don't know.
Honestly, I was exposed to nutrition when I was in undergrad, and it was like a really shallow class. They were like making you get in this body composition analysis, and this was in the 90s.
Yeah.
And track calories. That was the class, like tracking calories. I dropped out. So I dropped out of my first nutrition class. I think I have a bold soul, someone who seeks a lot of depth, and some of that real third dimensional kind of vanity focused stuff. It obviously appeals to me. I live in Los Angeles, but I knew that there was more to it. So when I got into nutrition, I really started to understand that it was transforming my being. Like, it was changing the person, how I showed up in the world. It changed my relational dynamics. It changed my sense of safety in the world. And that's when I was like, oh, nutrition's profound. We're not talking about calories right now. We're not talking about macros. We're talking about, we didn't know this at the time, but microbes that live inside of me, right? We're talking about my nervous system, my immune system. And so I had a very, very notable change in 2006 in my health, and nutrition was a big part of it. And so that's the point that I said, you know what, I'm going to go do more of this. And people were asking me for help. So it kind of felt like nutrition chose me. And I was able to go back and finish my undergrad, get a master's degree, become a registered dietitian nutritionist. And I worked in the field for many years with substance use disorders and eating disorders and kind of off the beaten path topics.
Yeah.
And then finally went back to school to get a PhD in public health. I have a minor in health psychology. So I've just brought it all together with biopsychosocial models to look at things from multiple angles. And it's been a really wild ride. And there's been a lot of resistance to some of the topics that I'm interested in. I've taken a fair share of darts and arrows over the years for some of my interests, but the tidal wave is here. It's coming, and it's so cool.
Okay, so you just said a lot. So I want to ask you a clarification question, because this is something that I think is confusing to many people. You said registered dietitian, nutritionist. Can you explain what? I thought there was a difference, and you tell me, is there not? Because registered dietitians are the ones that I've always worked with when I've worked in hospitals. RDs are in the hospital system, and they get crazy over nutritionists. I know there's a war going on there in that world, right?
Yeah. So it's funny, when I was in school, there was all this, angst. The RDs are supposed to be the ones that go to school and we take biochemistry, and we have to do this unpaid internship. And then you have every other person in the world practicing nutrition that can call themselves a nutritionist, and it's not a regulated term. So there was just a slew of content when I was a student. What's the difference between a registered dietitian and a nutritionist, right? And it seemed very catty. Like, there's truth to this, okay? That the registered dietitian is the recognized healthcare professional. If you're talking about doing medical nutrition therapy or something that an insurance company would recognize, it is a registered dietitian. So anyways, there was a lot of that sort of combative, we are the experts and no one else is energy. And I always thought that that was silly, this assumption that we're the only ones that know stuff. But fast forward, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which is my parent organization, decided to change the name from RD to RDN to take back the nutritionist term, right? So a registered dietitian is a registered dietitian nutritionist. There are other types of nutritionists that are out there in the world, and there's a ton, and there are plenty of people that can be nutritionists without any formal training in our world, writing books, being coaches and stuff like that.
Right.
And that doesn't bother me the way it does other people.
It really does. Yeah.
It bothers people a lot. They're like, you're not allowed to weigh in on these topics. I'm like, let's let everyone weigh in. If you're excellent and you're good at what you do, you'll be able to make an impact. You don't have to go after other people.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Good point. Really good point. Okay, so let's talk briefly. There's so much to talk about, but how did your past inform you about nutrition? I mean, what was it that you went through? It's interesting to me that you just started to change your behaviors without anybody telling you. You never saw a therapist. You didn't see a dietitian or nutritionist at the time. And, you know, can you talk a little bit about the addictions that plagued you in your younger years?
Yeah. I am a product of rave culture, rap culture, underground music culture, late 90s, early 2000s. And I'm a product of the early opioid epidemic, the first wave in early 2000s. So I had pretty severe substance use disorder. And I did go through multiple treatments, correctional facilities. I had some pretty low spots, you know, in my early 20s.
Multiple.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I've been in hospital detoxes. I spent 2 weeks in solitary confinement in a supermax. I mean, you name it. I've been to the
that's
gates
a
of
huge
insanity
thing.
and death. Yeah.
You're not really talking about that very much. That's a big deal.
I try not to milk that too much. It seems like, you know, to have, you know, an addiction and some low spots and then spend the rest of my life talking about it feels a little weird to me. You know what I mean?
Does it?
It does. Yeah. It feels like I'm just like, that's the value that I bring to the world, that I'm a convicted felon and now I have a PhD and I'm just going to spend the rest of my life talking about that. I mean, I got to be able to at some point stand on my own ground and stand in today and not just live in 2004, 5, and 6 for the rest of my life. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And do you know that your history and your story is something that people want to hear and maybe need to hear?
Yes. And I think
to see where you've come from, that's amazing.
I think if I'm honest, like I've been a person in recovery, and, you know, people in recovery get asked to tell their story all the time. So I just get I get a chance to tell it all the time.
You do? Okay.
I do all the time. And I get a chance to take people through the journey and pull on the heartstrings. And, right. And like, it's a big part of my life is like telling the recovery story, giving people hope. And I do talk to people that have been incarcerated. It's a huge part of my life. But when it comes time to like get on Instagram, I want to be able to talk about other stuff. You know what I mean?
It's cool that you have such a colorful past and there's so much that you can talk about and you do talk about. That's cool.
Right.
Yeah. It's a multifaceted and layered life you have had and are having.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So you started to get better. You did it on your own, sounds like. And then you go ahead.
I did the nutrition part on my own.
You did the nutrition part on your own. Okay.
Yeah. I had a lot of helps through people and spirit, you name it. Yeah.
Good. Okay. So the nutrition piece you do on your own. What is it? What were you doing? So my listeners are listening to this like, well, we want to know what he did. So tell us let's get down and dirty. What did you do? What made you feel better? What were you eating? What did you not eat?
Well, I can say this. I had just transitioned from spending, you know, the better part of 2006 in a correctional facility. And, you know, there's just a lot of ultra processed foods. You know, it's almost a status symbol in there when you can go to commissary and you go to store, right? And you buy, you know, items, chips and cookies, right? And like people fight over, you know, food items, use it to gamble, right? You name it.
Mm-hmm.
And so growing up, it was, I definitely had, you know, classic 1980s baby, fast food, right? I chose my friends during elementary school based on what snacks they had in their lunch, right? Like I was highly attuned. I have a genetic legacy of alcoholism and I found food early on. And so, when the drugs came into the picture, the food stuff sort of went away. And then when that got removed, it was like the food stuff. So I had a period of time when I was just eating institutional food and ultra processed convenience snack foods. And for me personally, what I really did was I transitioned to a different living environment, and I just started eating things that had real colors in them and things that were supportive of gut health. And it wasn't rigid. And that's the part that that's the kind of eating disorder informed part. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to start counting calories or anything. It was more like, no, I'm going to look for God energy in food. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going to
life-giving foods.
Yes.
Life-giving foods.
Life-giving foods.
Right.
And
that's what I say. Yeah.
Exactly right. And I just started to find things that I hadn't really explored, like, lentils and sprouted seeds. And, I'm really big into beans, nuts, and seeds. I'm really big into protein. And yeah, like I said, a lot of colors from produce.
But it's hard to go from the processed foods to that. I mean, I'm thinking of myself, and I'm thinking, because we, like you said earlier, we're addicted to the processed foods. And
correct.
How did you go from the processed foods while being incarcerated to getting out of jail, and all of a sudden you're eating peppers? Like, I don't think I would do that. Broccoli, I like broccoli, but I wouldn't just choose it. I probably would still be at McDonald's eating those fries.
Sure. And I'm sure one of the first things I had when I came out was an In-N-Out, which is here in Los Angeles, right? Like that all happened.
Yeah.
I have a theory, and I think we both work in the behavior change space, right? Like helping people step into new chapters, right?
Yeah.
Like, how does someone go from here to there? What's the mindset, right? Like, what's the energy? And I've had a chance to talk this through with a lot of people over the last many years, as I'm sure you have. And I have a theory that I like to call a window of opportunity. It does seem like every once in a while there's a little crack in a window, and the universe is pulling someone towards something new. And I, as a provider, practitioner, coach, I can't always create that window of opportunity, right? And so sometimes people come to me in crises, and they're like, like I know what to do, right?
Yeah.
Show me how to do it. And it seems like there's these times in our lives. Maybe it's the intersection of desperation, willingness, and opportunity, where there's a little crack in the window. And it seems like if you can listen to the call and step in, right, you can you just feel the wind blow in a different way, and it starts to feel different, and people can just start to listen and be intuitively guided. And that's how it happened to me, and this is now, 17, 18 years ago, and I've had a long health journey, and most of it's been super positive, but I've had my fair share of challenges, times in my life when I wanted to like pivot or step into a new chapter, and I've had difficult times, right? And I've learned that I can't force these things. Maybe just focus on getting good sleep, staying spiritually fit, and the window of opportunity will open up again. And it always eventually does, when it's time to pivot. So I had a window open. It was crystal clear to me. It was a hard reset in my life, and it felt very accessible, and I had so much hope. And I think that's the key ingredient. I was highly optimistic about a different way of life. I was not making negative predictions about my life. I wasn't assuming things would go bad. I was like actually seeing things starting to unfold in highly productive, highly positive ways. And I just acted in accordance with that assumption.
You had an energy that was alive and vibrant and positive.
That's right.
And that's a gift. I think if that's a gift, because so much of the work that I do is people who are struggling with, really being high vibration, high vibrational individuals. And I think, I don't wake up every day feeling that way. I have to, it's a mindset. I got to make myself do it. I am a lot of the time, but not all the time.
Right.
And sounds like you decide to, this is it. This is what I'm going to, high positivity, high energy. Hope for the future.
Yeah, I got a lot of reinforcement, which,
you did. Yeah.
Yeah. From
support
from people, from the universe. I felt different. There was motivation that came as a result of small changes that led to medium changes that ultimately led to huge changes that changed the trajectory of my life and informed my entire career and everything that I've done since.
Wow. Okay. So you're a dietitian, and I saw something that you sent to me months ago. I was reading about you, and this is a while, and something about you being a disruptor in the nutrition space. And I want to talk about that because I said to you before we start recording, I love disruptors. I just am so interested and curious about the disruptors. I think it makes me feel alive. So let's talk a little bit about you having a different opinion than your colleagues.
Sure. And I think there is a difference between the disruptor who is, stirring the pot because they want to make noise or bring attention to themselves, and the disruptor that truly has, humanity in mind.
Yes.
And even the disruptor that doesn't want to be a disruptor, but can't not.
I can't stay quiet.
I can't stay quiet.
I can't stay quiet on this. Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
And I'm a can't stay quiet.
The first one's ego. The first one's
ego.
The second one is altruistic. It's more it's not just for me. It's because I have to tell the world this. I know this, and I have to say this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, my dad always told me, growing up, and I never really understood the value of the line. And I don't know who said it, but he said, there's nothing more honorable than being the sole dissenting voice on matters of principle. Right?
Say that again.
There's nothing more honorable than being the sole dissenting voice on matters of principle.
Oh, right? I love that.
Everyone is unsure what to do, and they follow the group thing, right? Yep. And there's something off, and there's one person in the group that says, hey, something's off, right? And everyone else looks at that person like, hey, are you with us or are you against us, right? And if someone truly is attuned to principles and is attuned to what's going on, and I've seen this a lot in the nutrition space, especially the kind of emails I get behind the scenes. People know that there's things going sour. There's profit motives. There's hidden agendas. Yes. There's a lot of bias, but it's just too hard to speak up because, right, the popular narrative doesn't support some of these alternative views. And there's a lot now of cancel culture, especially in the eating disorder field.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Like if you're not saying it exactly the way we're saying it and aligned with these social justice issues and not the other ones, you're out. You're out. In group.
It's
out
true.
Group. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's sad to watch, but it's also, I think, a reflection of what's going on in society as a whole, of people feel unsafe and are searching for group identities and really need to feel aligned with something where they can kind of be part of a tribe. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that's a natural instinct for humanity to want to feel a part of a group. But when it's happening like in science, it gets a little bit weird. Yeah, it's not supposed to happen in science and health, right?
It is, yeah.
And that's where it's like, okay, people are no longer, trusting intuition or standing in their own brand of dignity. People are seeking safety in groups.
Because it takes courage to be an outlier. It takes courage to stand up and speak your mind and say what you think and even give your opinion. It takes courage. And most people say, not worth it. I have a job here. These are my colleagues and my friends. I'm respected. I'm not. And I don't have an opinion about that. I think that would be a really difficult thing for someone to stand up and stand out, because this is also people's livelihoods and they are worried they could lose it.
So
I'm not judging it, but I know what you're saying. I see it too.
Thank you for pointing that out, that some people have income that's based on their safety and security has the top of the hierarchy of needs. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that certainly resonates with me. And I think that's a really important point. So I don't know. I found myself in this master's program, a nutrition school, dietitian school. And, it had a very predictable demographic, right? It was, mostly white women. Mm-hmm. And, it felt to me like it wasn't a empowerment program. It was sort of a training programmed to teach people how to fit within the system and not question, and to be, for example, a clinical dietitian, or to work for, government agencies like Women, Infant, Children.
Right.
And the training was deceitful to me. They were kind of saying like, you are the expert, you are the evidence-based practitioner. But then at the same time, there was messages of like, well, you're not like, we're going to tell you what to think. You're not really an independent thinker. And so I picked up on very early on that there was a lot of strange, unscrupulous relations in the nutrition space that weren't disclosed. And if you think about how the medical industry works, there's a lot of conflicts of interest with pharmaceutical interests. And, that became an issue like in the 80s and like in the 90s. Like it started to become really clear that, people that had conflicts of interest had to disclose them. And and in the nutrition space, that wasn't happening because nutrition wasn't as highly regulated.
Yes.
So here I was in school, and this was a long time ago. We've actually come a long way, and I've been a part of some of that change. And I'm listening to a webinar about GMOs from Monsanto. I'm listening to a webinar about salt from Frito-Lay's. I'm listening about how safe high fructose corn syrup is from the Corn Refiners Association. And I saw that a lot of the education that I was receiving was—
This is your school? This is your schooling?
This was my school. It was very industry friendly. And I'm talking about not necessarily like always in the classroom, but the classroom is accredited through an agency that oversees, and they have their events and they have their conferences. And so I started going to these nutrition conferences and would just basically see the food industry had sunk their teeth in so deeply, and that the entire conference was basically deep pockets controlling the narratives around nutrition. Right. And if you think about it, it's genius. Like, oh, who's the people that make nutrition recommendations to the general public from the hospital? It's the
dietitians.
Little Debbie dietitian that makes $60,000 a year. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And like, she doesn't have a advanced degree, and you can pull on some emotional strings and make them feel valuable and make them feel like they're making change in society, when in reality, like the mega food corporations are behind the scenes pumping their products, pumping out the science, and totally controlling the narrative. And I don't know if it's because I have trauma or because I used to be in the world of counterculture, drugs, right? Like, but my antenna picked up on this stuff so clearly. Yeah. I was like, someone's here for the take. This isn't all true. Do you guys see what's going on? And that was the early days of people looking at me like I was crazy, right? The classic, like, are you a conspiracy theorist, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with these foods. And I mean, it was powerful because we formed a group early on to kind of whistleblow in the nutrition field. And I kind of put my career on the line early.
Yeah, you did.
Like, early.
You did.
You know what I mean? Like my
that
first
was the
year.
Groupthink. Yeah.
Yeah. We went against the groupthink. We stormed the conferences. We stormed social media. We put on events, and it was like a really exciting time in my life because my inner revolutionary was able to show up. And it was I'm not going to be, I didn't become a dietitian to promote the financial agenda of food companies. You know what I mean? Like, I'm here to help people. And so, there's a lot of this energy out there in the world of people that are like anti-processed food, anti-food corporations, pro-real food. But I always had this way of being able to help people make sense out of it all, to make peace with food, still not be like a dieter, but still not trust all that information that's being pushed. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I think it's gone really the opposite way from what you're talking about when you were being the disruptor. Today, that's not so disruptive because today we're all concerned about eating non-GMO, and Monsanto is not a great organization, and everybody wants to eat, real food, slow food movement, farm to table, life-giving foods like we had spoken about earlier. That seems to be the norm. And I think most socioeconomic, maybe I am not correct on this. I think a lot of socioeconomic levels, individuals no matter your race or religion, know about this. It's that people can't afford it. So that's why they're not buying organic. That's why they're not going to Whole Foods, or people call it whole paycheck. Or they can't go to Trader Joe's. They're going to Piggly Wiggly, or our Jewel here, and they can't afford, like avocados are really expensive right now. So they're not doing it. So that's what I think has happened. But I think a lot of us do know to eat, air quote, eat better. What do you think about that?
I'm with you. I think that to look at nutrition at the individual level at this point is sort of silly, and that we have to look at these structural issues, right?
Yes.
Socioeconomic status, systemic issues, food access, like what's actually in the store that's in your neighborhood. Yeah. And that's, a lot of the work that we do in public health. My PhD is in public health, right? So that's what we do. We don't look at people. Yeah. We look at neighborhoods. We look at groups. We look at systems, right? Yeah. But I would make the argument that economic resources and access are a huge part of it. But another really, really big one that I think, kind of is becoming more understood now is just that life is hard. Yeah. And that people have unresolved stress, trauma, and adversity. They have early life developmental trauma that's been biologically embedded. And the food that you can get in a convenience fashion has properties that make it more dopaminergic, that make it more rewarding. Yeah. And to actually think about, going through a life that's hard and having unresolved stuff and having uncertainty and insecurity, and then, being able to get a little bit of neurochemical reward from food, it kind of makes life feel like it's doable. You know what I mean?
100%. 100%. See this all the time, every day. And it's when you're talking right now, I'm thinking it's the 12-year-old boy or girl who comes home, who was kind of bullied, maybe not bullied, kind of bullied, comes home and just wants to eat through a row of Chips Ahoy chocolate chip cookies. Yes. Or the mom who's working full time and has 3 kids and is going through a divorce and is like, I can't do dinner tonight, so we're just ordering and I'm going to Netflix and chill. That's and right. Where's my wine? Right. And I wanted to work out, but you know what, that I can't. Life's just too hard right now. And
it's too hard.
That's what I'm thinking about as you're speaking. That's who isn't that today? It's so that's many right. of us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And I've had my taste of it in the last few years.
I have
life
too.
is hard.
I have too.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? I need a break.
Oh, I'm not knocking it. I mean, you and I may know better. I'm not always behaviorally better. I mean, Girl Scout cookies are out right now, and I just completely plowed through almost a whole row of Thin Mint Girl Scout cookies because I love them. I try not to do it every day, but
that's right. That's right.
Well, we're not perfect, right? But this is. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm with you. We are not perfect, and it's so important to be human. One of the pieces of the nutrition field that I picked up on early that I think is worth mentioning is that, I got into nutrition for mental health and eating disorders, and the common eating disorder narrative does sort of ignore what we're talking about right now, the neurochemical effect of food, like the addiction-like properties of food. You know what I mean? And that was the sort of next kind of revolutionary disruptor energy, is that we got interested in food addiction and ultra processed food addiction, which is, a very taboo topic in some circles and very well accepted in others. I think most people can agree that it exists. It's less clear what to do about it, but there are still people that are saying, no, this is BS. This doesn't exist. This is just diet culture. This is fear mongering.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean?
Yeah, I don't know that it doesn't exist. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know that it doesn't exist. I mean, and I know you and we spoke before, and we won't have time to get into this today, but the GLP-1s, the semaglutides.
Yes.
And one thing that's been interesting in the little bit of research I've done, and you probably know more about this, is that what I've heard my clients say to me is that for the first time in my life, the food noise has quieted into my mind. Mm-hmm. And so now they're looking at these semaglutides for the addiction space, in the addiction world, to take away. And it's interesting. Sorry about that. I don't know if you can hear that. I just had my texting came through the computer. Mm-hmm. I have somebody who said to me, whose partner we think strongly is has a drinking problem and went on, I think it was Ozempic or Mounjaro or one of those drugs for weight loss. And she said to me, what's so interesting, Anna, is that they're not drinking. And I don't know. And I said, I'm thinking, she didn't know either. I'm thinking, that's interesting. She's like, yeah. Well, they started taking this drug like a month ago and they've lost like 5 or 10 pounds. And, but what's great is that they just have no interest in drinking. So it's promising, I think.
There's definitely something there. And it makes the case that, food noise is biological.
Yes.
Yes. It's not just diet culture, body image. It's not just messages, that there's a lot of biology involved here. Microbial, hormonal, neurochemical systems biology is at play. And that's what we need to think about.
I love that you said that. And I hope that those who are listening really hear that and rewind and play that again. Listen to what Dr. David just said again, because there's still so much judgment. For me, I have my clients who are dealing with weight loss. Maybe they're in their larger body frame, obesity, and the judgment they get from their family members. Oh my gosh. Why can't you just lose the weight? Why can't you just do it? Just stop eating. Just don't eat Cheez-Its anymore. It's not that simple. And they are so full of shame. The shame that they're carrying around and the trauma from growing up this way. So I love that you just said that.
Yeah, it's so important to always try to, like I mentioned earlier, take a biopsychosocial view on health, which means to think about the biological mechanisms, think about the psychological constructs, and think about the social context, right? And the interplay between them all. It is a much more evolved and nuanced way of thinking about health that I highly recommend. So sometimes when people ask me questions about health, I'm like, let's look at it from each one of these perspectives, right? And break it down, not to say that they're separate and distinct, they're all related, but they are all different disciplines that tend to have different views and different research questions and publish in different journals. And, it's really important to integrate them all.
So tell me, what are you doing today? What type of work are you doing today? I think you got your fingers in a lot of different things. So tell us what you're doing.
I originally launched a company called Nutrition and Recovery as a new dietitian 11 years ago to really work with substance use disorders and co-occurring eating disorders. And we brought this message of gut health and sanity before vanity to mental health treatment centers, right? And that's been such meaningful work. I've done a lot of research on ultra-processed food addiction, binge eating, etc. But I think in the last few years, I made a little bit of a pivot to not be so constrained to those specific disorders and to think about mental health more broadly. There's these growing fields of nutritional psychiatry, nutritional psychology. So I've become much more interested in, nutrition for depression, anxiety, PTSD, trauma, ADHD, and really thinking about mental health as a whole. And there's data now, right? It's a growing field. There's a lot of voices here. And I'm trying to be a voice that is eating disorder informed in that conversation, which I think is what sets me apart. There's a lot of doctors that are saying, we have this diet for this condition, right? Whether it be the ketogenic diet for certain forms of severe mental illness. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on. I tend to use the word nutrition rather than diet just because of my eating disorder background. And nutrition involves, of course, food and as well as supplements. There's also a lot of people that are moving into the space with a heavy supplement focus. And I'm really trying to be like a voice of sanity and saying, there are gut-based, food-based interventions that are going to be very, very beneficial, for example, for depression and depressive symptoms. It's just a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do. It's not the kind of thing that, like, as you said, oh, here's the Mediterranean diet handout, go do your thing and report back. Like, it's a lot of work for someone to go from A to Z. You have to go from A to B. You might have to have someone hold your hand from B to C.
Yes.
You might have to spend a week or two in C. You might end up back in B before you get to D. You know what I'm saying? Yes. It's this long journey of healing decades of dieting, decades of gut dysbiosis. Like, it's a lot of work. And that's the part that I'm really trying to, get across to people. Nutrition behavior change is not a simple task. I mean, the window of opportunity can open and you can step through. And, I had it pretty darn easy back in '06 because I had a great window and I just had some opportunities. But for most people, it's a process that requires recovery and it requires ongoing support. And not everyone needs, to meet with you or with me, weekly. But the people that do tend to do much better, of course.
Yeah, they do. We know it. Yeah.
We know it, right? That have, and that aren't like, that have the resources to not be in a rush. It's
right.
like, I'm sorry. I don't know that I can fix you in one session. You know what I mean? I don't think I can fix you at all. I think I can. Right. I think I can help you heal yourself.
Well, we can't fix people. They have to. I don't believe in fixing. And I know that you're coming from the same world, codependency piece there about fix managing and controlling others. We're here to help you, to show you the way, because we have information and we might know more, or we do know more in these arenas than you do. So we are the experts in this. You're expert in your field. I appreciate that. And I did a post on social media this week or last week about, are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Mm-hmm. And you said something earlier that reminded me of, I remember when I was at a place in my life, more with my business and being in the entrepreneurial space and being tired of doing it alone. And it took me being really in an entrepreneurial crisis before I finally paid for a business coach who was not cheap and was expensive. And I had to do it, but I was in a crisis. So I paid her every month for 3 years.
Yes.
And it was an investment. So we didn't go out to dinner. So I didn't buy my Starbucks. We didn't order takeout, but I needed to do it because I needed to grow my business and I didn't know how the hell to do it. So that's, and I find it, people come to me really, unfortunately, they're in a place of crisis where I'm so sick of carrying around these 40 pounds. My marriage, when often like I need help with my marriage. And I would say to my couples, I don't do couples therapy anymore, but I used to say this all the time. You should have been here 4 years ago.
Right.
But now you're in a crisis point and I was so loaded. And I would say to the couples, okay, usually one of the couples had 1 foot out the door, 1 foot in the door, but they had 1 foot out the door. Yeah. So you make a good point about that. This is really hard work. And if somebody wants to work with you, sign up for it, but know that it's a commitment and to stick with it. It's not going to be perfect. You're not going to have great days. You're going to have down days and low days and days when you fall behind and you're meeting with Dr. Dave and you're like, I got nothing to report because I've just done so terribly. Well, we don't care about the terribly, but keep showing up, right?
Yes. And of course, there's the financial piece, right? Insurance doesn't always support nutrition work, and life is hard. People have bills to pay, and it's just not reasonable to expect someone to be able to do the long-term work. And so, we have these ways of trying to offer additional support. And I've had the fortunate opportunity to have a huge impact on a lot of people over the last 10 years. But in the last 2 years, I kind of, realized that there was certain things that, I was doing in terms of education about anti-inflammatory eating or hunger fullness scales or, mindful eating. There were certain topics that most people could really benefit from. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I made really high quality videos to really capture some of the education that I provide. And I put them all into an app, and I built a food log where people could track their food qualitatively rather than quantitatively, which means
I love that.
It's not like MyFitnessPal. So it's not calories, macros. I thought about, what if people could just check in about food groups and take a picture and think about the colors that are in their food and think about the hunger before and the fullness after and get a chance to journal. So it's a very eating disorder informed, trauma informed, safe place for people to do food tracking with the goal of improving mental health. Now, I know there's people out there that says, that sounds terrible. I want the numbers. I want the stats. I want the graph that shows my body fat percentage. And, I've always been the disruptor, the person that sort of gives people what I think they need rather than what they want. Right. And so that's the difference between, like, in my opinion, like a treatment provider and an online influencer or a coach. Like, I do treatment, you know what I'm saying? I work with complicated cases, and my goal is to, like, help someone move from a place to a place. And sometimes that means thinking about things in some new ways, challenging people's old ideas, helping them build new ones. And especially with eating disorders and food stuff, there's a lot of, discussion that needs to happen. So yeah, I ever since I launched my app, which is called Wise My Nutrition, my practice has just become so much, like, more productive.
Really?
Yeah, because people are actually able to engage daily and, do the things that are, educational in nature, and show up for the session to talk about the more important stuff. So yeah, that took a few years. That's really what's been on the radar, and someone could use it without a provider or practitioner. It's not practitioner dependent, and it's also built for other coaches to use with their clients. So there's a connect feature. Someone could follow your coaching client on the app and just watch their food log,
what they're doing.
Yes, just watch their journals and send a little message of support. So it's a really cool, very multi-dimensional journey that I've been on to create what I'm calling nutrition for mental health.
Good for you. Congratulations. I mean, that's not easy to create an app like that. That's a lot of work.
It's like, it was like a second PhD, I'll be honest.
It's like your baby. It's like your baby app.
It's been
a second PhD.
Yeah. Like, creating the app was harder than my dissertation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations, and thank you for the service that you have put out for all of us, because I think this is so needed. And I love, you have strong messaging around, it's not just body image and what you look like and calories in, calories out. There are so many apps like that. And I've been on them. I've been on MyFitnessPal,
Sure.
and I'm on one right now, and I don't even know what it is because I'm never on it, because I don't like tracking. I get tired of it.
Yep.
And I get sick of it. And there are days I'm like, I don't want to do this. And maybe I don't want to know what I'm doing, or I'm like, I did fine today. I don't need to keep logging, because it's accountability, but I don't know, there's an aloneness with it. So I love that you talk about, like, you could actually have your coach on there supporting you. That feels, it's very solitary.
Yes.
We're on our phones by ourselves and logging that I ate a hot dog today. And okay. Well, what does that mean?
What does that mean? Yeah, that's right. Where's the feedback? There is a few things that the app does track, which is mental health scores. So it can show someone how depression, anxiety, ADHD, PTSD symptoms, eating disorder symptoms, food addiction symptoms change over time.
Wow.
As someone does daily work and moves through the modules, they can see how mental health scores have changed. And, I've broken down nutrition for mental health into 3 areas. The first is nutrients for brain health, right? Like vitamins, minerals, right? And there's omega-3 fatty acids. There's just a whole lot of nutrients that are needed for the brain. The second is gut health, which is, most people know, connected to the brain. We call it the second brain.
Second brain.
The first interface of the food after the mouth, right? Right. And then the third one is the kind of eating disorder focused, or I shouldn't say focus, I should say informed, which is the cognitive processes around food, the mindset, the rigidity versus the fluidity, right? All the other parts of nutritional psychology that most people don't give enough attention to, which is like my strong suit, right? Talking about the different ways of thinking about food. And so the journey goes pretty darn deep, into that stuff. And yeah.
Okay. So if anybody wants to know about your app and anything about you, I'm going to put it in the show notes, so they can go to the show notes. They can just click and they'll be able to find you. Before we end, can we do like a rapid fire? And I don't know if you can do this rapid fire quickly. And I did tell you before we started recording that I was going to do this, but I'm going to ask you anyway, if you're up for it. A few minutes. Okay. Somebody comes to you. They are 14-year-old boy. Mom comes to you with her son, ADHD, maybe just got a diagnosis. And they're the mom's into food. The mom's into good, eating well, but this kid, what would you tell that 14-year-old boy? He's in your office. What are you going to tell him to do as far as helping with his ADHD symptoms? What are you going to tell him as far as nutrition goes?
I'd really want to know what they've been eating and assess for deficiencies right off the bat, because there's a few things that can be very helpful for ADHD. Omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium, there's low dose nutritional lithium that can be supportive. So we want to address some of that stuff right off the bat because it'll help kind of make things work smoother. But yeah, it's difficult to reach a 14-year-old with some of these topics because they are very much making decisions based on, the neurochemical response to the foods or, to a lot of other factors. But I've been able to go pretty deep with a 14-year-old and describe food as something different than they had conceptualized it before, as something that is super supportive of brain health, something that's going to make you a better performer in sports, something that's gonna, you know what I mean?
That's going to hook them. That's going to hook a lot of them.
Pitching you want, your test, right? You want to remember things better. You want to be the best on your team, right? These are all things that nutrition has to offer you. And so there's just a bunch of stuff that you could add. Right. And as opposed to I'm taking things away, let's add all this awesome nutrition to your life and just see what happens. Right.
So you could have pizza. You can go out, order pizza and have pizza with your baseball team. But that's one day a week. I mean, and most of the other days, let's get this good, yummy foods in for you.
Yeah. Or let's put some onions and bell peppers and mushrooms on it. Let's just try it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What about, and this is common, you got someone who's coming into you who's dealing with anxiety. What are you going to tell someone who maybe, I don't know if they have any generalized anxiety disorder, if they've got a diagnosis, but the world today is dealing with anxiety at levels we've never seen. So what are you telling somebody with anxiety who's coming to see you?
I do like to figure out if anxiety is, like you said, generalized or specific. There could be just a really specific area of life that is a source of worry. Like, for example, body image, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of people that have anxiety about the body they live in, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's something that I'm confronting often in the work that I do. But one of the big things that people tend to overlook with anxiety is the caffeine. It's if people have anxiety, giving caffeine a break can be really, really good test.
Okay.
And I personally have anxiety and it pretty much goes away when I don't drink coffee. If I'm off caffeine completely, I don't have any anxiety. So I have a little bit of a bias there because that's my own personal journey, but clinically I've seen that be true for a lot of people. And then of course there are some great supplements, CBD, inositol, omega-3. There's a lot of things that could be supportive without testing or with testing, right? I like to do, blood testing and saliva testing, etc.
So you do that in your office?
I do a lot of functional lab testing, which is a big part of the work that I do. But, in summary, most most health conditions respond favorably to eating less ultra processed foods and eating more minimally processed foods. And if someone could get that message without it feeling like a diet, without it feeling punitive, without it conferring risk for disordered eating, you're on the right track.
Okay. Well, I could talk to you for another hour at least because you've had me more and more curious about what you do. Do you see clients do you have an office in LA?
I sure do. I have a good old fashioned brick and mortar
space.
I sure do. Yeah.
Do you do anything online?
I do a ton online and I'm very fortunate that I'm able to meet people anywhere. I've done clinical work and, coaching with people all over the world. And yeah, very accessible and very willing to be a source of support.
So if they want to work with you and they need saliva or lab work done, you just send them to their clinic, like a Quest kind of place.
We get the
in their
test
town.
Comes in the mail. We find a phlebotomy service and people do testing and, we get to the root cause of some things pretty quickly. Almost anywhere. There's a few states that we can't do it in, but as a general rule, we can do it. Okay.
Good to know. Yeah. I want people to be thinking this through pragmatically. How would this work? I mean, I'm in, Mississippi and he's in California. How could I work with this person? And this is important information. Okay. Wow. Well, thank you. I am so happy to have met you, Dr. David, and that this worked out, because I think I had to reschedule you because I got sick.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are doing this today. So I just love this conversation, and I appreciate your time.
We did it. I appreciate your time. So grateful.
Yeah. All right. Take care, everybody. You want more information about Dr. David? It's in the show notes.